Coming up on Car Advice, is hydrogen the fuel source of the future? We interview Hyundai's manager of future mobility, Scott Nagar, to find out if hydrogen cars will become mainstream.
Future classics. CarAdvice founder Alborz Fallah joins the panel to discuss whether buying cars is a sound investment.
And category conflicts. We pit the Mazda CX-3 against the Mazda 3 in an attempt to determine whether you're better to buy a small SUV or a hatchback.
Welcome to Car Advice. We've got a huge show in store for you this evening, including Hyundai's Scott Nagar, who will join us at the desk to discuss the future of hydrogen mobility in Australia. Alborz Fallah will join the panel to shed some light on something we're calling auto investing and small SUVs versus hatchbacks. Which one's the smarter buy and why? Joining me at the desk to talk all things auto again is CarAdvice Senior Road Tester Paul Maric. Good evening.
Hello mate, bit of a mouthful.
It is a little bit, and straight into another mouthful. Yep. Large premium SUVs in Australia, the BMW X5, they've released pricing and spec information.
They have, mate, and it's sharply priced as well. We're talking starting price of $112,000 plus on-road costs, and then it goes all the way through to the M50D, which then kicks off at $149,000. So it's a pretty comprehensive launch cycle. Normally they just pick one or two and then they sort of bring in the rest later. Yep. But this is a pretty good setup.
Absolutely. So two models starting off in Australia first, xDrive 30D and then xDrive M50D. $112,900 as you said for the 30D, $150,000 for the M50D. Both diesel engines there. The X5 really set a new standard for SUVs globally. It was the first SUV, certainly of any size, regardless of the fact that it was large, that you could drive like a car and it didn't feel like a truck.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. This is cemented by the fact that BMW owners, 80% of them optioned M Sport packages with the last X5. So it shows that people want this sporty image behind the wheel. And it's a car that's seriously sporty, especially if you go down the road of the X5M. That thing was an absolute weapon. Twin turbo V8. It sounded like an absolute machine. What is missing here, though, is the cheaper two-wheel drive variant. So with previous generation X5, they brought in those close to the end, and it was a way to milk a bit more out of the platform while they can. And it's certainly grown in all dimensions, new tech as well, so cannot wait to get behind the wheel.
Good-looking vehicle as well. You know, don't mess with something that's already so popular. And on the point you were making, M Sport trim, BMW Australia said it accounted for 80% of sales locally on the last X5. So $4,000, which will add a few things like body kit and bigger brakes, but that's what people are spending the money on, and it makes it look even more sporty. Now, Paul, I've got to say this one surprised me, mate. Volkswagen tops the brand loyalty study, so close on the back of all the diesel emissions issues, still up there, enjoying the loyalty of their customers. That really surprises me.
It's truly bizarre because it wasn't that long ago that they cheated and had higher diesel emissions. And I mean, you're cheating more than just the cars, you're cheating customers. But people have short memories, and it seems that they're just as loyal to the brand and willing to come back and get some more Volkswagen into them. Volkswagen
make great product. It's not about the product. It's just interesting the lack of effect that this has had on their customers, I think. Also doing really well in this particular study were Mazda and Toyota. No surprises there.
Toyota, they started off in Australia setting up dealerships everywhere. So you know that regardless of where you go in Australia, there's a dealership near you. And if you're travelling across Australia or even more so, Mazda, they just nail it each time when it comes to satisfying customers. And we said this a couple of weeks ago, that you can't just sell a car. You've got to actually retain the customer.
Absolutely. And I think the other interesting data that we've seen recently is Skoda doing really well in a customer satisfaction survey. So again, Roy Morgan, as opposed to the loyalty, this is satisfaction post-purchase. Skoda tracking really, really well in that one.
Exactly. Skoda, 5-year warranty. You get you go into a dealership and they have a different feel, a different vibe. They do the cycling sponsorship. So they're actively involved in the community. So I suspect that Volkswagen will be cherry-picking a few things here from Skoda to try and improve their customer satisfaction as well.
And I think the message here, as we keep saying, is that it's not just about the sale of the vehicle. These brands that are doing well are looking after customers post-purchase, and that's the most important thing, because then that keeps them loyal, keeps them coming back into dealerships. Car sales in China, Paul, there's been a bit of a slowdown there. Now, that, you know, if you're looking at the Chinese market in isolation, is a big deal, obviously, because they sell a lot of cars. However, this could have some impact globally, couldn't it?
Yeah, let's have a look at the numbers. We're talking about an 11.6% fall in September.
Which is how many vehicles?
Well, to 2.4 million.
Yeah,
it's still a ton of cars.
Yeah, it's a lot of cars.
Bigger than a ton, but it's the third month in a row. And the reason this is a big problem is because a lot of these brands manufacture models specifically for China. Now, it's fine to do that, but the R&D required to get a car just for the Chinese market means you've got to sell a lot of them to pay it back. And everyone thought China was a sure bet. So if China's slowing down, it's a great sign of what's happening around the rest of the world.
It's going to impact the premium manufacturers too, because if you look at the likes of Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Jaguar as well, a lot of those brands do long wheelbase or super long wheelbase versions of vehicles that we get here, specifically for the Chinese market, a lot of the SUV brands as well. We've been seeing some of the cheaper Chinese alternatives coming into Australia. That might slow down also. But I think that volume of cars, if you're selling that many in a market and that amount of money is being input into your company, if you take 11% out, that's a big sales slowdown overall that then, as you said, has a roll-on effect in a whole bunch of other R&D areas also.
Absolutely, and we're seeing that effect in Australia now too. A lot of the premium brands are struggling. They're struggling big time. So this rolls on to Australia. When you get a lot of Chinese in Australia, they hear about what's happening in the market back home, and it's happening in Australia too. So watch this space. I'll be interested to see how it pans out.
Future vehicle technology is a really interesting touch point at CarAdvice.com. We talk about it a lot. I'm a fan of hydrogen vehicles, having driven them, and I think that they're a really interesting forward-thinking technology. And there's a lot of talk about electric vehicles, Paul, as we're aware, but hydrogen is a touch point for me that I think we need to look more at. Scott Nagar, you're with Hyundai Australia. You're here, have a chat to us tonight to tell us a little bit about hydrogen. And you guys at Hyundai have an interesting philosophy on where hydrogen and electric sits, don't you?
That's right. We're not picking winners. The future is going to be zero emission. Countries around the world are banning internal combustion. So we need to make both of the drivetrains for light and heavy vehicles. So we're not going to pick a winner. We're going to work hard to introduce both vehicles here in Australia.
Now, if you see at the moment we have petrol engines and diesel engines, I've heard you guys describe the way that you see electric and hydrogen similar to where petrol and diesel sits currently in 2018.
Yeah, the crossover is exactly the same. So in a small petrol car, we're going to have the EV drivetrains will take over. When it comes to fuel cell, that's where your large SUVs, your large trucks, buses, trains, trams, ferries, you name it. Anything that's heavy and has a lot of mass you need to propel, fuel cell's perfect for that. Long range, quick refueling, gets it back on the road. Scott,
I don't think many people would have thought that Hyundai would be the company that has a petrol car on the market, a diesel car on the market, a plug-in hybrid, a hydrogen car, and now soon to be a full electric car as well. Hyundai has invested a lot of money in this. Are there certain synergies that are taking place now to evolve these technologies even further?
There is, and a lot of the drivetrain components, so the electric motor in the fuel cell vehicle is the same electric motor that's in the Kona EV that's upcoming in Australia as well. So to bring the price down, and that's what we all want price parity, we need to make sure there's a crossover of parts and technology. The more of the same part you're making rather than the individual parts for each model, the quicker we can drive the price down, and that's our target.
Is that what these partnerships are about? We've seen the hydrogen partnership with Audi, for example, in developing technology with Audi. We've seen other manufacturers do it with sports cars because it's hard to go out there and just build a specific sports car on your own. Is that what these strategic partnerships are about for Hyundai, making this technology more affordable?
Yeah, exactly. If we can be making hundreds of thousands of the drivetrain rather than tens of thousands or hundreds, it's far quicker to get the price down. So the components within the fuel cell stack, the tanks themselves, all the algorithms to drive the technology, all need to be made in mass production, in mass volumes. We've got the capability to make a lot of cars every year. We want to make a lot of those zero-emission cars.
Where are we at with getting a sustainable infrastructure in place so that the future is cemented and we can actually bring these cars and know that we can charge them and use them?
Yeah, we're about 10 years behind when it comes to this technology, both EV and fuel cell.
So not that much.
It's a long way behind. But we're working hard. So Hyundai was a co-founder of Hydrogen Mobility Australia. So it's an association made up of car manufacturers, oil companies, gas companies, technology companies, mining resource sectors, government advisors, the CSIRO is part of it. There's a whole lot of people coming together now to talk about the technology of the future and the infrastructure. The car's finished. We start producing the car this November in right-hand drive. Yep. I've got nowhere to fill it.
Well, I was about to say there's a lot of talking, but are they actually doing anything?
Yeah. And who should come to the party, Scott? Should we be leaning on governments to help with this infrastructure? Because I don't know that it necessarily should be up to the car company to build the vehicle. generate the technology, make the technology affordable, and then also build the infrastructure as well.
So we're working hard with those people that have a massive footprint across Australia, whether it be traditional oil companies, gas companies who want to get into this field, or technology companies who want to sell the technology as well, as in the technology being the fuel, the hydrogen fuel, whether that be grey, blue, green, however it's produced, we just need hydrogen as quick as we can.
Well, I was about to say that people don't really understand that when it comes to electric cars and even hydrogen cars, we're talking about a car that emits nothing. And in the case of a hydrogen car, it emits water that is clean enough to virtually drink. Yep. I mean, where are we going with that? Do people really understand these things enough? What sort of education role does Hyundai have to play in this?
I think as a car manufacturer, we need to play a bigger role there. And when Nexo comes out later this year, we have vehicles on the road next year, one of the big benefits, as you said, is a zero-emission car where it's only water coming out of the tailpipe. But one of the other things a hydrogen car does, it purifies the air. So we need pure air coming through the stack to run the fuel cell. So we take out 99.9% of all the particulate matter. So every single fuel cell car, bus, truck, train that's driving on the road is purifying the air around it. We purify enough air every 15,000 Ks for 2 adults to breathe for a whole year. So imagine half of the cars on the road now that are fuel cell cars, sucking in all the pollution from the dirty buses and trucks and cars around us.
Well,
cleaning the air.
Sounds like an ideal thing to do. A question as well with regards to hydrogen. So they've been criticised for not being entirely efficient. So you've got a lot that has to go into creating hydrogen, and then you end up with a net result where you do get water, but there's also around 20% inefficiency where you've got heat escaping. Are there any sort of innovations where we're going to be capturing some of that sort of offput from a hydrogen? Yeah,
I mean, just from our last model, the iX35 fuel cell vehicle to the new car, there's been about a 20% efficiency gain, so in longer range that we can get out of the vehicles. But the bigger thing too is making the hydrogen, so getting it as green as we can. And the best way to do that is from wind and solar. The best thing about Australia, they've got other countries looking at Australia right now to supply the green energy for the future. So hydrogen or ammonia made in Australia, shipped to all our northern neighbours, being Japan, Korea and the others. They want our energy now for their transport networks. Why aren't we planning to use that energy for our own transport networks?
We should be using it here. I think the big thing for viewers at home who don't probably understand what we're talking about here, with the hydrogen vehicle, having tested them, the most positive thing about them for me is that they're completely normal to drive. It feels like you're driving a normal petrol car. And what we're talking about here as well, when we talk about electric vehicles, it's that 4+ hours to recharge from flat. Whereas with a hydrogen vehicle, when it runs low on fuel, you fill it up in a couple of minutes, and that's the really useful benefit to the consumer, isn't it?
That's right, and we've done drives throughout Europe and North America, and you drive into a service station, fill up in 3 minutes, and you pull out and it drives like a normal car, except the car's like an electric car. We only plug it into a wall to charge it, so we've got instant torque. In our case, we've got 395 Newton meters of torque and 120 kilowatts of power, so
impressive numbers.
Yeah, it's like a normal car, just better.
Yeah. Well, you can go to caradvice.com to read all about what Hyundai's doing, and there's absolutely no doubt that they're at the global forefront of this development, and they're doing it across all those platforms. If you've been paying attention to the news lately, you'll know that a 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO sold for a world record $48 million. In fact, it was just a little bit over $48 million. Yes. And that is silly money. So we're going to have a look at investing in cars, because believe it or not, investing in cars is a real thing. CarAdvice founder Alborz Fallah, you're here with us this evening. Paul as well. We're going to pick some cars here, but there are another two that have sold for quite a lot of money recently. What were they?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't just a one-off, this
No,
Ferrari.
it's not.
We're talking in 2013, a Mercedes-Benz W196, 29.6 million, and then an Aston Martin DBR1 in 2017 for $22 million.
Now, we know you own an Aston. That was not just any. That was not any old Aston. The interesting thing here is all three of these are race cars.
Absolutely.
But buying cars to make money is now a thing, isn't it?
It is definitely a thing. It's been a thing for quite some time. In fact, there are plenty of graphs that will show you that there were better investments than the stock market.
Yep.
Well, if you get the right car, obviously.
Depends on the year as
Yeah,
well.
that's it, exactly. Look, personally for me, as a car lover, I would never buy a car simply as an investment to make money. What I would sort of look for is, can I buy a car, enjoy it, and then when it comes to selling it, not lose my house over it?
Yeah, so maybe even break even.
Well, when
maybe
you say enjoy it, we're not talking about putting 200,000 Ks on a van.
No, I would say about maybe 1,000 Ks a year.
And the people that Alborz is referring to, I call them speculators. So people who come into a market purely to buy the car, put it in a garage and then sell it in 5 or 10 years thinking they're going to make money. they're a different.
Also known as anyone that bought a 911R.
Anyone who bought a 911R, and we saw that happen with Porsche. Yeah, we're never going to build another manual.
Can we explain
maybe we won't.
what happened there?
Go for it.
People went and bought a 911R because they were told this will be the last, the absolute last. We will never ever do any more manuals. We will, they'll be the last naturally aspirated. And then all of a sudden, prices went through the roof, and Porsche said, "Oh, yeah, we're actually doing another
manual coming." Yeah,
you know, someone paid over $1 million for one in Melbourne.
Yeah, and that list price was 300,000, 330.
They're about 500 on
500 on the road.
500
okay.
on the road.
So double the price, and then the price fell out of them because they were making more manual cars. So we're not really talking about that. We're not, and that's the difference. I think. If you go back to our parents' generation, which are the people who bought cars, we've seen locally, right? So Brock Commodore sold recently for over $2 million in Australia, so an ex-race car again. But we've seen people who bought those cars 20 or 30 years ago because they really wanted that car, and then one day they wake up and go, wow, my car's worth this. Yeah. They're really different to the person who's just going in there deliberately to make money. But we've had to double down and pick a car that we would buy right now that we think might be worth something in the future, and you went with...
I would either buy a Lamborghini Huracan Performante or the expected Superleggera coming out soon. That would be the two cars that I would pick.
I wanted to hate on his decision, but that Performante, that's an unbelievable
The problem is Alborz is normally wrong about everything.
But he's right there, isn't he?
Unfortunately.
He really is,
isn't
he?
It's a shame because that car, well, it's not a shame, but the car is amazing. It sounds incredible. Yep. It looks absolutely awesome, and this is kind of like a renaissance for Lamborghini because they're using advanced materials in the car. It's not just an
active aerodynamics.
And we also know, this is the thing for me, we know there's going to be limited numbers of these cars.
That's right.
So there's not going to be a hell of a lot of right-hand drive, there's not going to be a hell of a lot come to Australia. So if you were to buy one now in Australia, I think demand will always climb.
Absolutely, and I'm not saying you're going to buy it and it's going to skyrocket up. It's probably going to go down a bit before, in due time, it'll go back up. But you can also go to like an Aventador SVJ will also be an amazing choice.
Yeah, it will be.
Both of those cars for me, I reckon, would be future classics.
Now, hang on, before you get to me, given he's normally wrong and he's been right, that must mean your decision's wrong.
No, absolutely right. No, I'm absolutely right. Not
right.
So mine is the Ford GT.
So it's the one you can't get in Australia.
Yes, but let me explain.
Left-hand drive only.
Invitation only.
Built in America.
Have you got an invite, Paul?
Not yet.
He's waiting on an invite. Yeah.
Australia Post.
They only work 3 days a week now, don't they?
Right, exactly.
So Ford GT, if you can get one. But a little bit more realistic would be the HSV GTSR W1.
Yeah.
The reason I say that...
Boy from Geelong.
Mate, it's a weapon of a thing. A little too much power for you guys, but it's a weapon of a thing. So we're talking about one of the most powerful production cars in Australia. Very limited numbers. Asking price of $169,000 when it was launched. Now retailing for over 200. Yeah. Wait until a few of them are crashed off or things happen.
How many did they build?
It depends which market you're talking about, but overall it was a little over 300. Okay, so
it's not a lot.
That's not a lot at all. And it's a part of Australian history, really.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and it's an Australian-built car. The best part about it's the American engine.
Yes. So Trent, you've got Italian heritage. So which Italian car would you pick?
Bullet Mustang.
Okay, so that...
Wait, the old one or the new one?
The new one.
Why?
The old one's already too expensive. The new one, I'll tell you why. Back when Ford released the GTHO, they built 300 of them, I think, or thereabouts. And it was just a garden variety car, like the Mustang is now. Ford have said 800 of these are coming to Australia.
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah, so at least half of them will get wrapped around trees, driven off the road. Just Australia.
So that means the rest of the world, there's probably...
They'll all be left-hand drive.
I think you could buy a Lexus hybrid that's more exclusive.
Trent, normally I respect your opinions, but this time you are so wrong.
Really?
Yeah. I'm willing to bet money on this, that in 5 or 10 years' time, that thing is not going to be worth anything.
I agree.
Everyone's going to buy a Mustang.
I'm trying to be a man of the people here. You guys have gone to, $1 million supercars.
You know what the Bullet is? The Bullet is Ford going, what heritage do we have till we can sell a few more Mustangs?
A movie.
Let's scrape the bottom of that
with Steve McQueen.
That's all it is.
That's true.
Yeah. It does look good, but there's no chance it'll go up in value.
I think that limited numbers, I mean, we said this about the Huracan, that's the thing for me, is the limited numbers are almost guarantee that there's going to be some level of collectability.
800 Huracan Performantes.
I think they've sold like less Citroens.
They probably have in Australia. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Picasso.
I think though that brings up an interesting point because while you guys are both wrong about the Mustang, the reality is this: that these days you were talking about not putting 200,000 kilometres on a car. Yeah. What's changed now from 40 or 50 years ago? And these cars we're talking about, old cars now. What's changed is a lot of these cars were just bought and used back then.
Exactly.
Now, everybody, because our parents' generation have made this money on these cars, everybody now thinks, oh, if I buy a car, I'm going to make millions of dollars. So of those Bullet Mustangs, it's fair to assume that maybe 700, maybe 600 will get wrapped in plastic and rolled into a garage,
Trent, you can
and they'll never get
You're not
used.
convincing either of us.
Sorry, mate. Sorry.
Well, what about the Huracan Performante? It'll go into a garage and no one will drive it.
Reasons why Trent is wrong. That can be another segment one day.
And no one will drive it. One of my favourite pieces of reader correspondence, Paul, was a letter that we got from a reader which said, when we announced that there was going to be a CarAdvice TV show, we had a letter that said, oh great, I can't wait for another platform for Trent to rant on about why people shouldn't buy SUVs. Well, mate, I've got news for you. Have a listen to this segment because, here we go. We've had a reader letter and we get plenty of correspondence about this. I'm looking at buying a compact SUV.
Yep.
So like the Mazda CX-3 there.
I noticed you accidentally
I
pointed
pointed at the
to-
Mazda
they all
3,
look
Mazda
the same.
CX-3 there. Or should I buy a hatch? Now, we tell people largely that the compact SUV segment's a bit of a waste of time. Why is that?
Well, have a look at them. That car at the bottom, the CX-3, is based on the Mazda 2, which means when you open the boot,
It's about that big.
correct, you can't put anything in there. So the whole purpose of an SUV is to sit a little higher, to have plenty of room for kids and things. That car doesn't fit the budget. So the problem is that it's quite expensive, and when you get to that point where an equivalent Mazda 2 is 5, 6, 7 grand less, and you get to the CX-3, you're actually bridging yourself into the hatchback territory. And we know that dimensionally, that car is actually much bigger.
Absolutely. And this is not a smackdown on Mazda by any means at all. The Mazda 3 is an excellent car, so much so that we tell people if they're looking at a CX-3, which is based on a Mazda 2, look at the Mazda 3 because the Mazda 3 hatch right across the board is excellent. And in fact, the Mazda 2 hatch is probably smarter than a CX-3.
Absolutely.
But there's this rabid rush to buy SUVs when people don't need them. And I think when you're looking at a front-wheel drive SUV, you're almost looking at, a hatchback way of driving anyway. And this is across the board. This isn't just Mazda. Every manufacturer has said, oh, people are buying SUVs. We've got to deliver an SUV in that segment. This could be an Audi Q2 against an Audi A3. It could be a BMW X1 against a BMW 3 Series or a 1 Series. It's much smarter to get the hatch.
Yeah, so this is why we always recommend a 24-hour test drive. So if you were to do a 24-hour test drive, for example, with the CX-3, you'd take it home, you'd realise that nothing fits in it and that it's not really an SUV in the traditional sense. You'd then back-to-back it with a Mazda 3 and you'd likely go for that as a purchase option. So if you are looking for a new car, we urge you to go to that extra effort, do the 24-hour test drive, give it to your partner to drive and make sure that it fits in the garage and all that type of thing because you end up with a dud. I find it continuously staggering when people come up to us and go, oh, I bought a new car. And we ask, how long did you test drive it? I mean, 10, 15 minutes with the dealer
not
in the
at
car.
all. Yeah.
I mean, come on, this is the second biggest purchase you're ever going to make in your life outside of a house. At least take the effort to test drive this thing properly, read a review at CarAdvice and get informed.
And I think further to that too, and this is where we'd advise this reader that's asked about CX-3 or Mazda 3 to really test this, is take it home, do the 24-hour test drive. But if you've got kids that you take to sport, if you've got a child seat that you need to put in the second row, you might have a child that surfs or plays a sport that requires a bike to be loaded in the back or something like that. It's bigger stuff, so you need to get it at home and test whether that'll fit in there because there'd be nothing worse than buying, and we've seen this with Mazda CX-5. A lot of people have just gone, oh, it's a Mazda in the medium SUV segment, really popular segment. We love it because it's a Mazda, it drives well. They buy the CX-5 and then find that the rear's quite compact. So, maybe a Mazda 6 would have had more space in it in that instance. But I think the compact SUV, you need to test that, don't you?
Yes, and you take our advice, but Trent, I don't know that you took our advice. You ended up in a smart car. Dimensionally, you're not really the type of person.
No, that's true. I look like an idiot driving it, but that's not hard. And yes, it doesn't really suit me. However, it does suit what I need it for, which is for a motorcycle with a roof. But I think that the reality is that everybody's rushing off to buy SUVs regardless of how practical they are. And I think that's the message. We talk a lot about, and this is what that reader was getting at, saying I'm always ranting about SUVs. We talk a lot about the practicality of SUVs, and I understand that ride height and sitting up a little bit higher, but most times a station wagon is smarter than a medium SUV, and certainly in this segment, a hatchback is smarter than a small SUV because the compact ones really don't offer that much in terms of second row room and the luggage space.
So there's an occasion where we're both right, which is positive.
Doesn't happen often, does it? Yeah.
Let us know what you think. Advice at caradvice.com.au. We're happy to help you with any of your new car questions. And let us know if you've test driven something, taken it home and gone, that actually isn't going to work, and you've saved yourself a giant purchase.
Yeah, that test drive is the real message for us. Do it properly, spend the time, ask the dealer if you can take the vehicle home overnight and work out whether everything fits in it. Once again, that's all we've got time for this evening at CarAdvice. Join us again next week on Your Money, Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m.